Welcome to week 9 of our Sunday core messages. These are our resources that we are going to gather around for as long as we cannot be in the same physical space together. We are working our way through some thoughts and some ideas, and I've been speaking the last 2 weeks about joy, and we're tying that in with this idea of the presence of God, the people of God, and prayer. And so this week we're thinking about joy and we're thinking about prayer. Straight away, for some of you, they are not things that go together comfortably. They are not ideas or things that are familiar in our experience of equating prayer with joy, and that can feel unfamiliar to us. But don't tune out, don't switch off, stay with me, come with me, because I want to share something with us today from somewhere that might not feel obvious on first pass, but I'm confident that it will help us if we can stay with it. As always in these videos, that I'm going to share some thoughts. I'm going to encourage you to read some Bible. We're going to spend some time praying, and there will be a call to action, and we'll do that again this week. But I want you to read Matthew chapter 17 this week in your own time. I want you to engage with what's happening in that chapter, significant chapter. There are many important things happening on in and around that space, but there's a verse that I want to lift out for us today, Matthew chapter 17 verse 20, and you will know it, and you will know it well, and you will have heard people speak about it often, but I want to refresh it in our minds for today. Matthew 17:20, and it's Jesus after he has healed and delivered a child from demon possession. His disciples bring him to one side privately, and they are a bit confused and they're a bit frustrated, and they say, why couldn't we do that? And Jesus has a moment with them and gets a bit spiky and gets potentially a little bit frustrated with them. But then what follows is this statement that we are familiar with, that if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, and you can move mountains. What's that got to do with joy? What's that got to do with prayer? I want to speak to our frustration, and I want to speak to our temptation to condemn ourselves and to get into these patterns of stillness and of silence, because I think often we get a bit conflicted that we don't feel like we are full of faith. We don't feel like we are able to move mountains. We don't feel like perhaps we think we should, or we hold what we have and we compare it against what we could have had, or maybe what we feel we should have had, and then we get disenfranchised and we get disconnected, and then we just stop and we stay still and we stay silent, and we don't pray, and we don't chase after the things that God is teaching us and telling us, and we don't stay close to Jesus, and instead we do nothing, and we stay still and we stay silent. And I think Jesus uses this example of a mustard seed deliberately. I'm confident that Jesus didn't do anything accidentally. I'm confident that Jesus is God, and so he knows exactly what he's saying. So there are no wasted words, there are no wasted moments. And so that's why we give Jesus our full attention, because he is God. And so when he speaks, that it's significant and it's important and it's going to help us and it's going to challenge the way that we think about these things. So when Jesus says, if all you have is faith in seed form, then that's good. I'm going to work with that. And I think it brings our attention to what Jesus is calling us to. I think Jesus wants your attention. He doesn't want your gestures. And I think we get caught up in what have I done? What have I achieved? What have I made? Where have I been? What have I cast into the sea? And I don't think that was ever Jesus's point. I don't think that was ever what he was driving at. I don't think that was the lesson he was teaching his disciples, and I don't think that's the lesson that he's teaching us as his disciples now. I think what Jesus is saying is, sometimes you will feel like all you have is a seed. Sometimes you will feel like all you have is small and is insignificant and is not capable of helping anyone for anything. And I think we take what we have and we hold it against what we can't move, and we allow Jesus to remind us that it was never about what we could do. And we allow Jesus to speak to us, to remind us that God is the great I am, that he is enough. And so we compare what I have, the faith that I feel that I have, the joy that I feel I do or I don't have, even if it feels insignificant and minuscule in seed form, and I take that and I hold it against what I cannot move. And then I remind myself and I invite Jesus to tell me that he is enough. I hope you are tracking with that, and I hope that is speaking to you. And we have an opportunity now to take 5 minutes to pray. Again, as always and as ever, we will count that down for you, so you don't need to go anywhere or do anything else with that. You don't need to click away, pause the video and then come back. We will count down those 5 minutes. And in our 5 minutes of prayer this week, I want to encourage you to do exactly what I've just talked about, to take what you feel you have, hold it against the things that you cannot move, and then ask Jesus to remind you that he is enough. So speak to the mountains in your life. Be reminded of the things that feel impossible, that feel ridiculous, that feel that they are beyond you and outside of what you are capable of. And then you speak to God about those things. You spend time with him. You allow him to remind you of who he is. And we speak in faith, even if it feels insignificant and minuscule, and joy comes from being reminded of who God is. So put your gestures to one side and give Jesus your attention. Speak to God for 5 minutes about the things that you cannot move, you cannot change, that are hard and frustrating, the things that you are pushed up against, the mountains metaphorically in your existence. If you can and it is safe and right to do so, maybe get out and have a look at some mountains today, spend some time thinking about them, be in awe and wonder of the creation that we have the privilege of being surrounded by. But let's take 5 minutes, talk to God about the things that you cannot move, you cannot change, and ask him to remind you that he is enough. Let's pray. Okay, I hope you have spent some time with God in the last 5 minutes and consider the things that feel immovable and unshakable and that are beyond your control, your influence, what you feel you have access to influence and to change. And you have been reminded of the joy that is the peace in knowing that God is enough, and that our task, our job is never about casting those mountains into the sea, but our faith, even if all we have today is in seed form and it feels small and it feels weightless and it doesn't carry the significance that perhaps we want it to feel that it has, but we equate joy to who Jesus is, and Jesus is enough. Our call to action, you're gonna have to come with me again this week. I wanna explain something to you. We have a lot of hair in our house between us all. There's a lot going around, and the girls are not particularly fond of brushing their own hair. And that comes with some consequences. They are particularly fond of doing cartwheels in the garden, and they do like to play and they do like to wrestle. And so their hair can get in a bit of a state, and it can bring some outside inside, and it gets knotted and it gets tangled, but they're not fans of the rhythm of committing to brushing their hair every single day. And so I had the parental privilege and experience of brushing one of the girls' hair this week, and it was in a bit of a state, and it had been a couple of days, and we had all the sprays out and all the conditioner, and all the grass had to come out of it, and all the fun things that you get to do as a parent in that space. And I feel that speaks to us about joy and about prayer. We started this conversation, this thought about perhaps we don't always equate joy with prayer, and I want to encourage you that prayer is the process that you find joy in. What does that have to do with brushing my children's hair? I think it detangles us, the things that we bring in with us, the things that we have been engaged and involved in, the things that we are caught up in, the things that tangle us up, that carry around us, that maybe we don't want or we don't need to carry with us, but our reluctance, our reticence to commit to that process of detangling the things that we carry with us sometimes needs a bit of time with your Father, sometimes needs that oversight, somebody who can come alongside and say, hey, now is the time, now is the right time to detangle these things. My girls will not sit and let anybody brush their hair. There has to be an element of trust involved. They're not going to let people who think that their hair could do with a brush in their hair. They are only going to trust me or Bernie to go through that process with them, because it can be painful and it can be uncomfortable, but they know that if they're not going to commit to that process themselves, then they need to do it with their father, or to spend some time with somebody that they trust to get them through that process. And so our call to action this week is, will you let God detangle you a little bit? Will you let God spend some time with you in prayer and teach you the process of joy as he moves through some things that you're carrying, some things that you have around you, some things that you've picked up along the way that maybe are not of God, from God, or for God? And will you allow him to detangle those things from your existence? Prayer is the process to joy. We spoke last week about joy being what we contain and not what we are surrounded by, that it's the thing that we are living from and not kind of affected by. And that's only true if we will submit ourselves to the process of God removing the things that he wants to carry from us, for us, so that he will be glorified in the way that we think, the way that we speak, and the way that we act, that Jesus will be the center and the focus of the things that we do. Why? Because he is enough. And so even if your joy feels insignificant, like the disciples' faith in Matthew 17, even if it feels like it is in seed form, if that is all you have, I think that is enough. And I think Jesus knows us, and I think he is not asking us or condemning us through our lack of throwing mountains into the sea. Jesus doesn't want your gestures. Jesus wants your attention, because he wants to teach you the process of finding joy in his presence. How do you find his presence? You find his presence in prayer. Let's be bold this week. Wash your hands, love your neighbor, stay committed to each other. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.